Doot 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 theme song. Hey everybody, welcome or welcome back. It's Monday again, for better or worse. Hopefully you had a decent week since I last caught up with you. And I'm starting to think now, if I can't come up with an idea for another video, I should at least do a uh, a Friday podcast. Just another quick little catch up video, kind of like these ones on Monday. It'll be Monday Nick versus Friday Nick, because that's usually a far different Nick, as I'm sure most of you are the same. Monday, I'm usually at the end of the workday. I'm usually still jazzed from the weekend, but kind of wiped at the thought of the start of another week ahead of me. And then on Friday, I'm usually wiped from the whole week, but jazzed for the weekend. So it's very different, physical versus mental. And it'd be interested to see if I could tell a noticeable difference between how my Mondays versus Friday podcasts go. So it was just a thought, just kind of putting it out there. Yeah, so I didn't have much chance to do anything on Friday besides get stuff done. So I got the new car registered, inspected, um, all of the important gear moved to it. So I have the gas can, jumper cables, emergency roadside kit, all the stuff that I recommend everybody have in their car for just such an emergency. Um, Ideally you should have some water in there too, but water and like a power bar or something, just in case you happen to get stranded somehow. But I don't know. I always feel like the water just sits there, and then a couple years later you realize, okay, no, now all that just has is all the nasty plastic stuff in it. And I don't really feel safe having, like I say, a glass container in the back in case I do get in an accident. Now I have glass shards flying around, so I don't know. Water's always been a toughie. I usually at least have a bottle next to me when I'm driving, of water, not a beer bottle or anything, but that's not going to last very long in case of an emergency stranded situation. So I'm not sure. Uh, Got the knife that has the what do you call it? Those window smasher things. So it has a seatbelt cutter and a window smasher, and I keep it in the center console next to me. So all that stuff is just in case of a emergency. Um, I didn't move over. I had some sample dog food bags that I didn't move over because those have been sitting in the car for so long that there's no way that they can be good anymore. Dog food can usually go a little bit past its expiration date, especially if it's been in a dry, dark, dry place. But this stuff has been just in and out of humidity. I'm sure I've been putting so much stuff on top of it at times that it's not airtight anymore. So air's definitely getting into it. But I always like having a slip lead and a thing of dog food in case you happen to see a stray dog on the side of the road. It's a lot easier to be able to get them safely if you have some food to shake, and if you have one of those slip leads that you basically just throw over like a lasso and pull tight, and then they can't get away from you. Sometimes I haven't even needed the actual leash. Some dogs just are so happy to see somebody that's friendly, that is offering treats, that they'll just jump right into the car with you. It's like, treats and a ride? This stranger's awesome. I'll go home with them. So it's something I used to do a lot more often in Tucson, because unfortunately the rate of escaped and abandoned dogs is a lot higher than in my current area. But I still see the occasional one. The harder part about being out here is that if you see a dog loose and you're in the woods, well, you can pull over and try and go where you last saw them, but you can very quickly lose sight of them in the woods, especially at night. So although I've had the stuff in my vehicle and I have seen one dog, I have not actually been able to catch any stray dogs since I've moved back to this area. So we'll see. But yeah, car's all street legal and good to go for a good year, and a little less, but still pretty close enough. I did end up getting this pretty close to my birthday, which is nice. So that means that I have I don't just have half a year with the registration or something like that. I don't know if they pro date that. It's been a while. Anyway, so yeah, I realize why I enjoy it so much is that it reminds me of a little junker car that I used to have that was a Toyota Tercel. It was just this wimpy little lemon that, you know, when I say wimpy, I mean there was times going up a hill, I had no idea if it was going to be able to actually get up it, to be honest. And that one was a standard as well. And so even though it, had the occasional thing break down on it quite often, And even though it was so wimpy that I was actually scared sometimes if I could actually make it up hills, I could, drive, all the way uh, to a place for a weekend and back on a single tank of gas, whereas normally I would have to gas up before making the return trip. So I loved not having to put too much into the tank, especially with everything going on with gas and climate control and stuff. I mean, ideally we should all be driving electric, but it's still really new and not that affordable. So right now, what I can afford is getting a older, reasonably used, reasonably good condition, um, low gas. What do you call it? High gas mileage. I guess you could say great gas mileage. Let's just call it that one. So that was one thing that I enjoyed with the Toyota Tercel is I could just go and go and go and go and go, and then when it came time to fill up the tank, super tiny tank, so it didn't cost much, and that's kind of how this new one's going. So, um, one of the reasons why I love standard is just manual transmission is so much fun because you have something to do with all four limbs. All four limbs are engaged. You have steering wheel one hand, shifter on the other, gas and brake on one foot, and then the clutch in the other foot. So you're basically having all four limbs doing something. Five if you count your head, because your head's always on a swivel, side of your eye, like he says in Groundhog Day. And even if I hadn't made the vow to quit to not smoke in the car, it would have been a lot easier for me to at least have cut down, because again I have all four limbs engaged. That's I'm gonna have to get to a nice smooth sailing portion before I could actually like light up and roll the window down and all that stuff. So I definitely, and plus, when it comes time to like, okay, it's about time to flick the butt before the ash drops, but then you come to a section of traffic where you have to be shifting and everything and you can't quite get to it. So I think that that's where a majority of my old t-shirts, the ones that I've had, for years and decades, a whole bunch of them have just little burn holes right on the belly, and I'm pretty sure that's where a majority of them came from, is when I had have a cigarette in my mouth, but I had my limbs engaged and I couldn't do anything, and then sure enough, part of the ash that fell wasn't just cold, part of it was hot, and I think that's what happened to a lot of my shirts, which is a shame, because some of them, other than those holes, are still in amazing good condition considering how old they are. It's interesting to find out just how long you can wear a t-shirt for, and that's without even like repairing, because most of the place the t-shirts are going to do is they're either going to fray around the collar or they're going to have the hole start in the armpit area. And the armpit area is actually easy enough, especially if you catch it early, to just re-sew back up if it's a shirt that you really love, And yeah, it's just amazing that some of those shirts would still be nearly, no, I wouldn't say pristine mint condition, but I mean, certainly they'd be in decent enough shape that you would not be able to guess their age, except maybe because of the subject matter. I mean, usually it's an older band or it's a there's always different phases of t-shirts. So there's the funny phrase years, and then there's the graphic design years, and some of them I pull them out and I was just like, wow, the '90s called, and they're saying that you should have left the shirt with them. So when I had it was kind of funny because a little byproduct of that not smoking in the car. So I took the truck out for a dump run this weekend, which in of itself was its own kind of thing, because since I've been sitting there for a week, I mean, the thing was on its last legs. That's why I had to get a new car. And I didn't realize how much it was on its last legs, that just from not driving it for like 5 days, the battery was already completely dead. So I was like, awesome. So I already had to it was already long overdue for an oil change, I already realized. So I did the oil change first, and then charged it. Where at first I was really worried because it was charging on the other car, and then I went to turn it on, and even the clock wouldn't turn on. And if you know anything about cars and stuff, the clock uses up like the least amount of power possible. And if not even that thing's lighting up, that means that battery is 100% not even a volt left dead. So I go to charge it off of my girl's car, and so it's sitting there for a while, and then I turn it, and not even the clock comes on. So I was just like, okay, so that battery was literally on its very, very last leg, but my girl was just like, well, hold on, I just, maybe I didn't put it in a good connection, so she, rearranged her side of the wires, And I was like, no, I think you did it fine because, I definitely tested my side with a little wiggle and I heard a little static electricity, so I knew that there was at least some kind of charge. But sure enough, when she tried that and then we waited a couple more minutes, then clock and then started right up. So, but yeah, what I was going to say is, I feel like there's plenty of YouTube tutorials and stuff, so I don't know if I would necessarily do that. But I briefly was thinking about like, well, I know a couple of basics, like I know how to change a tire, change the oil, jump the car, basic stuff that everybody should need to know if they're driving a vehicle. But I don't think that many of them usually know how to do it if they didn't have a parent that showed them. And what if that thing needs to happen? Like they need a jump, they need to change a tire, they need to change the oil, and it's a holiday and everything's closed, but they absolutely need to. That most people would, and then it's going to be in that situation where it's just like, oh, I don't have service or I didn't charge my phone. So it's something you should know off the top of your head. It shouldn't be something that you emergency Google. So I was thinking about doing that. I'm sure that there's plenty of other videos out there, and many of them don't being able to do it better than I. But that's just a little tip that I would suggest is that at least the tire, the jump, not necessarily the oil because that's something that is a slow burn. I mean that's like takes like 3,000 miles, but it's I can't stress the importance of it. So I lost track of when the last oil change on the truck was, which is awful. That's actually one of the functions that you can use. Yeah, well, okay. There's a little life pro tip: is every car these days has how many miles is on it, but then if you push the button again, it'll have a trip, and so. In this case, mine has two, so I can actually use one for oil, one for an actual trip. But what you can do is anytime you do an oil change, you reset it to 0, because if you did it yourself, or if the professionally done one, the sticker, if it falls off, then you're lost as far as like, okay, when should I be changing the oil in this thing? It should be every 3,000. So if you just start your trip over again, and then you just check in on it occasionally. Once it gets to around 3,000, that's when you do your oil change. And I can't stress the importance enough because when I went to do the oil change, I noticed two things. One, it was very thick and black. And two, the engine holds 5 quarts. And so what I usually do is I just get the big 5-quart one, pour the new in, and then, pour the new out, and then pour the old in. And it's a great way to see what's going on with your car because in this case, I was down 2 quarts. I was only running on 3 quarts of black oil, which is not good. And it actually explains why I was hearing, a not so great noise in the car. I just thought it was something, else that might have been breaking down. I didn't realize the oil had gotten that bad. And with this particular truck, because this has happened twice now, but if for whatever reason, if the oil is lower, the oil light won't come on, but all of a sudden you'll just be taking a turn, and then the engine cuts off. And that's a scary moment because if this has never happened to you before, when the engine cuts off, so does the power steering. So now what you should be able to do, a quick little turn with one hand, now you have both hands and you're trying to use all of your body weight to continue. It can be a scary moment, especially if you're taking a turn. There's a car in the opposite lane, so you have to be really careful not to just turn into the car because suddenly the steering's not as responsive as you thought it would be. So it's happened twice now, and both times when I noticed that it had somehow, or one way or another, gotten low in oil. So interestingly enough, the oil light never went on, which every console should have a specific light for the oil, so I don't know what that's for. But the oil light never went on, but the engine stalled. And so it's something that you really should, check often, maintain. First of all, you're going to need an entirely new engine. If you just use up all of your oil, you don't change it, that's just going to completely burn out the bearings. You're going to need an entire new engine, which is one good reason to do it. But also, especially if you have a new car, it still has like machined parts. There could be like tiny little burrs. So the very first time that you drive the car, that's the most crucial oil change because there's actually tiny little pieces of metal and stuff in that oil. The oil's supposed to be a lubricant, and if there's little pieces, it's actually making scratch marks and stuff like it shouldn't. So so one of the reasons why this car is in such great shape is because the people before me did the oil changes like religiously. Like there's actually a full record of it was like pretty much every 3,000 miles on the dot. So, and the thing purrs like a kitten, and it's almost 10 years old, and it purrs like a kitten. That's one of the reasons why it has. That motor is going to take a while. I mean, fingers crossed, knock on wood. That engine is going to, you know, do me good for quite a while, and that's one of the reasons why. So, yeah, in the case of an emergency, roadside thing, you should definitely know how to change a tire. You should know where your jack is. Where to put the jack is a big one, because where to put the jack is usually different on each car. Where the tire is and how to get it out. For instance, with the old truck, it was one of those where you had to go in through the back license, like above the back license plate, and slowly crank the tire down until it was on the ground, and then you get it off the little wedge thing. And so, had I not known that, ahead of time, I might have been completely lost as far as how the heck to change the tire out. So in this case, I'm lucky. It's just the one where it's in the back. You lift up, you get the spare out, the jack and everything is right there. But what I haven't done yet, and I plan to before I get a flat tire, probably this afternoon while I'm thinking of it, or tomorrow sometime, I should go and check to see exactly where that jack is supposed to go. So that one's important. And then, yeah, being able to jump a car, not just for you, but also just, like to help out a friend. I mean, there's nothing worse than your car won't start. Oh, shoot, you either don't have jumper cables or you just can't get anybody else to come over. I mean, it takes, 5 minutes out of your day, if you're the car that starts, to go help out a friend that, or a complete stranger that needs a jump from another car. But the last thing you want to do is do that wrong, because then that could cause a whole other set of problems. Like, let's say there's a car stalled, you go over to help them, they have the jumper cables, but you put it on the wrong side. You could actually cook their jumper cables if you connect the wrong terminals to each other. The jumper cables can actually heat up and catch fire. So you need to know what you're doing. There's a specific terminal that you're supposed to put on each side, and ideally, red is supposed to be positive, black's supposed to be negative. I have seen some idiotic designs where there's a red cover on the negative that you pop off in order to get to the battery, and then if you look at the battery real close, oh shoot, that has a negative underneath it. So you sometimes got to be really careful when you're looking at the positive negative. Ideally, the black and red coloring is supposed to be correct, but that is not always the case with some stupid designs that have like a red plastic protective cap so that your battery doesn't corrode. It still corrodes just as fast, and now you're confusing it with the colors. So I don't know whose harebrained idea that was in that one car. But anyway, yeah. And it's still obviously a good idea to have AAA, because if it's neither of those easy fixes, like, it didn't need a jump or it didn't need a new tire, then you're definitely still going to need to get towed. And, the lock and the keys in the car thing is one of the worst. So I actually am pretty good now. If it's a car that I don't really care about, I mean, you can give me a wedge of wood and a wire coat hanger, and I should be able to get into most cars, as long as I don't care about that rubber lining getting damaged. But if you're done professionally, so that's why I was kind of nervous when I first got the car. Is this is one of the first times that I've had 100% fully manual locks, and they're those, that it just looks like that basically. So you just grab it and then if you're outside and you use the key, just. So I was just like, well, how is anybody going to be able to break me out? Because since I don't have a key fob, I have to be very mindful of the fact that I go outside, make sure I have the keys, and then I lock the car. In fact, I should just get into the habit of just locking it from the door lock itself and not pushing down on the button, but I'm lazy, and I know I'm going to start getting in the habit of doing that. But the point is that I was very relieved to see that if you're inside the car and you pull the door handle, it does automatically unlock the car. So thank God for that. So whoever tries to get me help me out if I'm got the keys locked in the car, you can just pull the door handle, and that should be true for most manual locks. But again, I don't know how far, once you get far enough back in the years of cars, how much of that stuff, because they had to figure some stuff out as they went along. Like, for instance, this is one of the few cars that I've seen that doesn't have the button to unlock the way back. That one you actually have to use with the key manually, which is a little worrisome. So ideally I should never get actually, like, me or a little kid should never actually get locked inside of a car, because they, as long as they're capable enough to pull a sideways door handle, then they should be able to get out. But yeah, if something ever goes funny with the way back lock, I'm pretty much screwed until I can get that thing changed out. So anyway, that's just mine car in specific. I don't know. I'm getting into so much details. I mean, I love the thing. Like I said, it's so much fun to drive. It reminds me back in the day when I first got a car, in that kind of freedom, the funness of it. So it was disappointing. I remember having my very first car, and it was a piece of crap. It was a death trap. I had to slam on the brakes in order to even get it to slow down. When I was at stoplights, I had to pull the e-brake just so that the car didn't roll into the other car, and it was just the most fun. I mean, I would actually just go out driving just to drive because it was just that much fun, and I miss that feeling. And I get a little bit of it back when I have the standard, because it's actually a little bit more fun to be able to shift the gears. If I feel like it's starting to lose speed as I go up the hill, to be able to downshift, and it kind of makes it fun again, because now driving's necessary, not necessarily fun. And as soon as you have to do something, it's almost like back when you were a kid, where you're just like, you look around your room and you're just like, oh, my room's such a mess, I can't find anything, I should clean it. And then your parent comes in and says, hey, clean your room. And then it's like, well, now I don't want to do it. It's kind of like that, where, back when, I had a car, first of all, the newness, the funness, the freedom of it. And now I usually only drive the car when I need to drive the car. So now it's like a chore, which is unfortunate. So being able to get a little bit of that fun back has been just so awesome. I'm sure it'll go away soon, and then I'll just be like, ugh, I'm having a shift all the time, ugh. But I hope it doesn't, because yeah, that'd be a bit of a bummer. But yeah, I think I'm done with almost all the car stuff I need to for now. Besides calling insurance again, because it's been years and they still think that I'm in Arizona, even though I've tried to change the address multiple times. I got on the phone with somebody saying, hey, I'm changing the car over to this car, so not the truck anymore, now on this one. And for the last time, I'm not in Arizona. And I just got the new cards in the mail, and they still say Arizona. So I'm getting a little bit upset, almost to the point where I might need to just start threatening to change insurances if they can't get their friggin' stuff straight. Because I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but if you have your insurance thinking you're living someplace else, and then you get in an accident, I mean, thank God, knock on wood, I haven't, because they wouldn't have paid it, and even though that would have been 100% on them, according to their records, obviously, because that's how they work, it would have been on me that I didn't make sure that it had been changed over. So yeah, just be real careful. Really pay attention to the details when it's any company that you might potentially have to try to get money from, because obviously they're not going to want to pay you, and they will find any loophole that they can and fight tooth and nail. So make sure all your ducks are in a row and all that stuff, because yeah, um, that was first world problems, right? I mean, the fact that I even have insurance and that's a decent price and it's affordable is pretty cool. But I don't know, maybe it's not a good insurance, because maybe I haven't had to use it to get paid out yet, and maybe I can get a card that says New Hampshire, but they could say, well, in our records it still says Arizona, and who knows? So yeah, just be real careful about what you're doing. Attention to detail. Don't just throw away mail when it comes in. And if you do electronic mail, for God's sakes, at least if you have auto pay, still, like, pretend you don't, and at least once a month, check in on your policy and make sure that they haven't changed anything, because I've seen so many horror stories about companies that just change something without asking permission first, and they say, well, if you had read the fine writing or whatever, it says that we can do that automatically, and it's on you to call or email and say, no, I don't want that. And a lot of times it's something you have to do every year. For instance, I had a credit union that I left after over a decade of loyalty to that place, because it was back in my roaring 20s when I did not pay good attention to my bank account, and I kept on getting overdraft fees. And I would call them and I would say, all right, first of all, this is my 80th time saying this, but I do not want there to be an overdraft fee. I want you to just decline the card. So if I swipe it through, say card not accepted, as opposed to accepting it and then charging a late fee. Well, they obviously want to get more money out of you if they can, especially if you're poor. They want to give you money if you're rich, but take money from you if you're poor. A million comedians have said it better than I have, so to not sound hacky, I'll move on. But I finally talked to somebody who was honest with me, and I was just like, "Hey, can I ask you a question? Why do I have to keep on doing this? If I mean, you have to have it on record that this is like my 80th, request to not have the, my eighth request to not have the overdraft fee done, and yet it keeps on happening." And they go, "Oh well, it auto renews. That's our automatic. That's our how did they phrase it? They were like, that's our standard setting for the policy is that we have the overdraft fee, and so every year when it renews, it's going to renew to that setting, and you have to call and say, I don't want the overdraft thing." And I was like, "You're going to make me do this every year instead of just putting a note in the system?" That's the last straw. Obviously you don't care about the customer. I'm just a number. And whether it's a good thing that I have had moments like that where I have that, I've given you my loyalty for a decade, and now I see that I'm just a numbers game, and I shouldn't be surprised, but this time it hit personally, and now I'm going to leave. Sometimes I can't tell if it's a good or a bad thing. So with the bank, I don't know if I really just traded up or because I did have so much time with that bank that it's like I probably could have gotten a really decent loan just based on my history with them and stuff. If I ever needed one, and instead I just severed ties with them because I was like, all right, that's a bullcrap policy. I can't believe that you can't just put a note in there saying Nick never has, never will want that unless he calls and says, hey, for whatever reason, put overdraft protection on. And I just left them. Now, I don't know that was a good thing to do. I have impulsively quit jobs before. For less than that. I don't really do that anymore. However, I don't regret my decision to quit my former job based on how I was treated. But that's mostly because I've started to come to realize that loyalty to a job is not that is not helpful for you. It's helpful for the company. So your best bet in life is to actually not be loyal to the job, and it's actually to constantly be on the hunt for another job. And then if you find one that pays better, then you can tell your current job, and they can either match that pay or you can leave them. And apparently there's a lot of people that were loyal to a job for 20 years, barely made the cost of living going up, they barely made that each year, and then they decided to do that tactic about job hopping, and they would double their salary within 6 months just by doing that. So loyalty to a company is bullcrap. It being impolite to ask what another person's making is bullcrap. That's something that somehow they managed to brainwash us over the years to be like, oh, you don't ask somebody what they make. That's just so rude. No, it's not. It's their way of hiding from each other what they're paying, so that if you're willing to work for 17, even though the job normally pays 20, they're going to pay you for 17. So oftentimes, especially if the person whose position that you're fulfilling is still there because they gave their 2 weeks and the company hired them, the person that is training you is the former person of that job. Before they leave on their last day, just be like, so just out of curiosity, what were you making? And then when your 90-day review comes up, demand that, or demand to leave, especially if you've been doing a decent job of busting your butt for the first 90 days. I don't know. Don't listen. Disregard everything that I previously said, because it isn't like I'm in a position in life where I'm just like, well, I've been doing so successfully, let me pass my knowledge on to you. But those are just things that I picked up along the way that I wish I had taken advantage of when I was younger. Maybe I should just start phrasing all of this as a podcast to my younger self, saying, hey, you better do better. And then maybe if there's a final episode, the final episode will be me in a costume, saying, wow, thanks, future me, look at how much better I'm doing now because I changed the timeline. I don't know. That's some ridiculous stuff. But I need to start getting ridiculous. This is not entertaining. This isn't even entertaining for me. So I need to start thinking outside the box. How can I make this unique? Because we are getting so saturated with podcasts, I can't even keep up with all of the celebrities that have podcasts that I enjoy and follow. It's insane. I find a new one each week because they'll come on. I'll be like, oh, sweet, blah, 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 blah. And then they're there not just to pimp their latest book or movie, but also to promote their podcast as well. And it's like, they got a friggin' podcast too. So everybody has podcasts. And even the famous ones, I feel like it's oversaturated. So what about dummies like me? So I'm going to keep on trying to brainstorm. But yeah, for right now, if I can't think of a dog or a pet video, I'm just going to try and do a Friday Nick podcast and see how things have changed since Monday Nick. But anyway, I think it's enough. It's been a good half hour. Should go do dog stuff and chore stuff. So thanks for listening. I appreciate you, and I will see you probably Friday.